So I guess what I've kind of done personally to survive all that and developed and been working on for over 20 years, kind of in my head trying to figure out how to do this is, you know, in order to survive and get quick impact and understand the companies that I was in, I developed my own sort of analysis strategic model of how to look at the industry. And that has allowed me, I think, to step in and if when somebody couldn't tell me clearly what the strategy was, actually go in and figure it out, and then figure out how I could succeed there.
I think it was first of its kind in the strip area, maybe. I mean, in the hotels in Las Vegas.
Well, I have to tell you, we'll see. I've just now begun sharing my model.
Okay.
And when we talk a little bit more about technology, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because it was something I carried in my head and then was very difficult to explain. And the data was very hard to pull together.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really something I could model and pull out, but I'll just kind of describe it to you. And,
okay.
And what I've discovered is that it's basically, you know, these elements that I call the sort of the 5 pillars of business, they're present in almost any kind of company that you want to look at, or business or industry. It just depends on how important each of those pillars are. But in gaming and hospitality, it turns out they're all very important. So would you like me to describe it?
I mean, if you want to start now.
So when I looked at it, I realized, okay, this is my simple model. There's only 5 things you really have to do to successfully run these businesses. And they're all very big and very complicated. But you basically need customers and the products. So you need to know your customers, what market they come from, what products, and the return on each of those. So really it's called kind of a value stream. What do you do that creates value or revenue for your company? And that's really the first thing you have to do, because until you start to earn revenue, you don't really have money to spend on much else.
Right.
You know, so and I think you'll find it always has been and still is today, the one pillar that every company spends the most amount of money, time, and energy is right now is customer service, knowing your customer, digitizing the customer's experience, you know, all of that today. And that's where you hear a lot of what the newer things are that are going on in gaming. Yeah. Okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
Does it apply to gaming as well, not only hospitality? I mean, the customer experience in accommodation, but also in gaming.
Yes.
Is it possible to personalize gaming experience?
Well, I think, you know, you have a lot of what we call locals casinos. So they may not always come for the hotel experience, but they're sure looking at the other things that go along with it: food and beverage, dining, you know, entertainment, spa experiences. Right. So I think it's really no different. Gaming is just sort of another activity that you can do while you're at a resort. And if you look at what's happened in the industry today, you know, gaming used to be 70-80% of the revenue of a lot of the large casino companies. And now it's kind of 50-50 with the other stuff, sometimes maybe less. As the popularity, you know, of coming to Las Vegas and everything we have grows, the revenues, you know, are much bigger on the non-gaming sides of the business. Yeah.
Major change.
Major change, yes. So really quickly, without getting into too much detail, the other 4 pillars when you look at a gaming or even any hospitality environment really is, it's a huge capital investment model. You have to build a building. It's very expensive, maintain the building. You've got to hire a lot of people. HR and payroll are typically one of the largest expenses in any company. So you really have to have a strong model there. Then, you know, the other thing you need, I remember this quote when Steve Wynn first opened the Mirage. It was said that they bought more things over the course of a year than most small countries. And so if you look at the depth and breadth of procurement that you have to do to support that industry, it's huge. And one of the drivers of why there's frequently the need for integration just in the back office is to provide all of the procurement options you need between retail, food and beverage, which are typically specialty, versus the other sort of generic purchasing. And then you also have managing the capital expenditures, which is another specialty part of it. So finding a company that handles all of that and could still integrate with your financial and HR systems has always been the difficulty. But there's a lot of great vendors who handle that well. And
numbers are turning in my eyes.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure it out, but
yeah. Well, I said it was complex.
Yeah, it is.
And then I guess to put the icing on the cake, the other thing everybody needs to run their business is information.
Right.
So, as I talked about, sometimes there's 400 plus software applications. And then when you add the security, and then if you think about every one of those pillars has a huge regulatory requirement over it. From information regulatory things like, personal identity, credit card information, just your licensing for your employees, your food and beverage handling, your OSHA requirements, the different gaming requirements. So now I've just totally explained why it's complex, right?
Okay. I mean, it's a daunting task, but I'm sure this brings opportunities as well.
Well, it does. And I think, when I talk about that complexity, that's really what drove me the need to come up with a simple model that I could understand a business. And now I think what I'm most excited about is I've carried these models around in my head and at different times done engagements for a client to really sort of do this, what I call the 5 pillars cross-functional financial view of their industry that allows them to, on one page, look at, okay, what am I really doing and what does it really matter? And then it really creates strategic alignment because a lot of times you have everyone running around in their own silo, if you will, of expertise, which is where I started. And because I got the opportunity to kind of go across the silos, I started to go, okay, there's a different way to look at the business besides just from within my one frame of reference. So, when you can have real strategic alignment and you can get all your silos aligned behind that, that's really been a difficult thing, I think, to do in business often. So that's really the purpose of my model. And I guess to get to my last point that I was wanting to cover with you today is that there's some brand new disciplines and technology that I feel like finally I have a way to make this model that's been in my head come to life. And it's through something I've discovered recently. In fact, Melissa told me about it. It's called business architecture.
Thank you, Melissa.
And I was recently, because she told me about it, and I got very curious because I thought, I've been talking about making blueprints for a long time. And, that's kind of what I had called my model. And so when she told me about the business architects, I was like, I think I might be one of those. Maybe I should go check it out.
Yeah.
So as one of the people I met pointed out, so I found a model for or a framework for what I've been doing already. And so I discovered that this business architecture guild had been formed back around 2010. And it really came out of a lot of other large complex businesses like Boeing, United Airlines, Federal Express. People that had very large operations and complicated models had also figured out that there needed to be a better way to understand those and to use that information when they were rolling out new products or changing or digitizing their business. They really needed to have models that they could look at and understand the stakeholders, where things might be in collision, and a variety of different business objectives like risk management. And so they started creating these reference models.
I see.
And so my goal now is to create a reference model for hospitality and gaming. Yeah. And the further discovery that I think made me most excited at the summit is there's now 8 vendors who have created software, which create these models in a pictorial view. Which is because only things we really had before were Excel and Visio diagrams. And none of those are really very exciting. They get kind of done, Excel gets passed around, and then who knows who has the latest version or who's changed it, right? The security around it is not good. Or if you've done a Visio of a complicated process, it's in some IT person's book somewhere, but it gets looked at once and then it's on the shelf and it's not alive, right? So the new software that the business architect vendors have come up with is one version of the truth that allows you to create a pictorial view of your business, just like you could with any, well, it has controls like you would with have any other software system, so that you do have one version of the truth. It sits in one piece of software, but it can be accessed according to roles, updated as needed. And then when you're in a meeting, you can throw a picture of what you're talking about up at the screen, and everyone can see the same thing and understand it. Yeah.
And probably a team of, I don't know, 10, 20, it brings everyone on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. So, the IT people, the business people, the architects, the business processes, all of that can kind of be seen. I do want to correct one thing. It's not so much about business process, but it is about what are your capabilities, meaning what are all the things you have to do, your data models that support that, and a number of other things that there's a whole huge book on.
Yeah, it's great to know, because there's this concept of future of work. I mean, it's a hot topic, and probably the key component of future of work is mobility.
Yes.
I mean, people are not sitting in one single room and work hand to hand. Instead, they're just distributed around the world, and they just put something, bring some value to the table to make something happen, keep the operations up and running. So yeah, it's great to know.
You make a really great point, because that saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Oh, yeah.
And as we become, more global and we interact with each other, and our language sometimes doesn't always mean the same thing, even though we're using the same word. A picture makes it very clear about what we're all talking about. And I think that's one of the huge benefits of business architecture. And I've actually called it myself a pictorial science.
Right. Well, I was not familiar with the term, but yeah, thanks for adding that word to my vocabulary.
Well, you're welcome. I make them up as I need to.